Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for us to start. It is now 1:30 when we are supposed to start, and we have a very full program today. I would like to start by welcoming you all very warmly to this conference on Nordic cooperation in research infrastructures. My name is Kerstin Eliasson, and I'm the chair of the Council for Research Infrastructures at the Swedish Research Council. It's a great pleasure for me to say a few introductory words. Research infrastructures have become increasingly important for the development of science and research. This is not only true of the big science installations in physics and engineering, but also in the medical sciences, in the environmental sciences, and in the social sciences and humanities. The interest in and focus on research infrastructure has been clearly demonstrated by the European cooperation within the framework of ESFRI. But new and more potent infrastructures are being built or are planned all over the world. In order to be able to compete and cooperate in research, countries have to invest in infrastructures and make it possible for their scientists and researchers to have access to both national and international infrastructures. Nordic cooperation in this area has existed quite some time. I'm thinking, for example, of NordSync at ESRF, Nordinet, the Nordic Optical Telescope, and ASCAT, but there are also others. But this cooperation has taken a leap forward during the last couple of years. I think this development has been triggered by the ESFRI projects, but also by the work of Nordforsk and the Nordic Council of Ministers, and by the close cooperation between the Nordic Research Councils. The aim of this conference is to take this work even further, to try to become even more concrete than up to now, by means of action plans in 5 areas which are being discussed today and tomorrow. As is clear from the program, we have 5 panel discussions, and 4 of them will be introduced by a distinguished keynote speaker. A summary of the workshops will take place at the end with the chairs of the different sessions. In this opening session, we will hear from Dagfinn Høybråten, who is the Secretary General at the Nordic Council of Ministers, who will talk to us about the Nordic agenda for cooperation on research infrastructures. We then have Peter Honeth, who is the State Secretary at the Ministry of Education and Research in Sweden. He will talk about infrastructures for research and innovation. And then we have Gunnel Gustafsson, who is the director at Nordforsk, who will talk about enhancing Nordic and international research infrastructure cooperation. And finally, in this opening session, we have Lars Börjesson, who is, among other things, chair of the high-level advisory group on research infrastructures at Nordforsk. But before I give the floor to the Secretary General of the Nordic Council of Ministers, I would like to give you some practical information, and you will be able to see this on the screen if it works here. Okay, let's see. I think it will. Okay, there we go. Most important, first thing, toilets, code check, internet, how you can use the internet. Are you all aware of that, those who want to use it? And then about tonight, the dinner arrangements. You will meet here at 7 o'clock at Scandic to walk over to the Vasa Museum, and you can follow the people with gray umbrellas. I don't know whether it's going to rain, but they have gray umbrellas anyway. And you gather at the Vasa Museum at 19:20, and you are supposed to read, or you're advised to read the information sheet in your conference bag. And it might be a little bit chilly indoors in the Vasa Museum because they have to keep a very even temperature at about 18 to 20 degrees centigrade. So please do that. And if you have questions, you can ask at the registration desk or ask one of the persons with a gray lanyard. And I must confess to you that I don't know what that word means, but maybe someone does. So anyway, now I would like to ask the Secretary General Dag to come up here and take the floor, and you will use this. Oh, you have one. Okay.
Distinguished participants, speakers, guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear Nordic friends, I'm delighted to be able to give an opening address to this highly topical conference. I pay tribute to the Swedish presidency of the Nordic Council of Ministers, represented here by the Ministry of Education, to the Swedish Research Council, and also to Nordforsk, our own institution, which is a great success story of the Nordic cooperation, attracting co-funding at the double level of its basic Nordic funding. Through a few years, this has really grown to be a major initiative, and as I said, a major success story of what we do together in the Nordic countries. Congratulations. You are the experts. So let me briefly share with you why the Nordic Council of Ministers believe that this topic is so important. We're part of a big world, an international community, and as a region, although we are small, we're admired by many countries. Here in the Nordic region, we have a tradition of doing things together, of collaboration. Just take one short, imaginative look around the globe and see how this ability to collaborate really is most needed and where it's most needed. Often it's lacking or lagging behind, exactly in those regions where it's most needed. We collaborate amongst ourselves in the Nordic region. We like each other. We find it easy to work together. Not always easy, but most of the time we find it easy. This is an outstanding asset. And it is perhaps one of the reasons why we have our welfare states. Our secret, which we share freely with the world, is we have found the power of the added value of vicinity. Vicinity is not just about neighborhood, geography. Vicinity is about feeling close to each other, being family. And the added value of vicinity is to make use of that resource and to use it to develop our societies. In order to renew and develop our welfare states, we must work harder and be more clever, and we must stay competitive, but we have this advantage, this comparative advantage of being in the vicinity of each other, politically, socially, culturally, and we are in many ways a family. Taken one by one, we are relatively small countries. I grew up in a country, Norway, where we have a prime minister who's well known in Norway for this quote: Norway is a small country in the world. Norge er et lite land I verden. And of course you can stop there. Or you can say, so what? And that is exactly what this cooperation is about. It's about clever people, outstanding people, some of whom will be researchers. They're also born in the Nordic countries. some of them. So we must retain and develop our talents. And to do this, we must offer a world-class environment for research and innovation. This is a challenging thing for small countries. But what is very challenging, doing it apart, is maybe not so challenging, doing it together. That's the whole reason why we work together in the Nordic countries. We find it, in many cases, smarter to do things together than to do it apart. Because it's easier to achieve quality and efficiency when we scale up our activities in cooperation. Or when we share the burden, create a division of labor, which makes sense. And this is precisely where Nordic cooperation kicks in. We can do this together. We want to create a region for research and innovation based on shared access to research infrastructure, building on our comparative advantages, our added value of Infinity. And let me just add to that. We want to nurture Nordic talents, but we also want to attract talents from other parts of the world. Talented people often have a tendency to group together. Talents go to places where they know they'll find other talents, or to places where they find the right tools and infrastructures available. And they go to places where they have access to the best students and to the best data. And students sometimes go to the places where they have access to the best professors. This conference shows very well that research infrastructure is not only about laboratories, big buildings and tools. It's about that too. Laboratories and powerful tools are important. Just look at the European Spallation Source and Max4 and many other types of physical research infrastructure. Physical research infrastructure can indeed be costly. I don't need to tell you that. By sharing this type of infrastructure across borders, we may cut costs and improve efficiency. We live by the very creed of Nordic cooperation, doing together what it makes more sense to do together than apart. Research infrastructure is also about our digital highways and networks. We are interlinked, and we must strive to be even more interlinked. Our digital highways should not, of course, end at the borders. To collaborate, we need avenues of data sharing. Then we need to facilitate the sharing, and this is obvious when it comes to physics. Perhaps the first image for a layman like me that comes to my mind is all the data from the big crunchers of neutrons. But all other fields of science, climate, environment, materials, health and welfare, also work with big data. Researchers, teams of researchers, and students all need to share these massive, huge amounts of data. Researchers and they need to access large-scale computing facilities, powerful simulation software. Data produced at one place will feed into data research and in other geographical locations. Cooperation is thus not only utilizing the added value of Infinity, but also overcoming the challenge of distance. This brings me to one of my last points on infrastructure, our outstanding data. This is really one of the treasures of the Nordic region. Good, reliable data and good, compliant people, citizens. In the Nordic countries, we trust each other. Maybe that is at the very core of the Nordic model. Maybe that is one of the reasons why we are so admired these days, because we have this level of trust. But this level of trust has also during generations, created the treasure of a common database in our registries. We trust our institutions. We trust them so much that we give them access to key data, valuable data. We trust the state, we trust the local authorities, we trust the hospitals. Well, as a former Minister of Health, I sometimes doubted about the trust of the hospitals, but at least we trust the schools. We trust the police, and we even, most of the time, trust the tax authorities. So, what we do is we comply. We give away with our data. And thus we create this treasure box, the golden opportunity for Nordic research. In coming years, these data will be of huge value. If we, on a Nordic level, find the right way to share it between us, a way that builds on the fact that they were entrusted to us. And in order to keep that trust, we must utilize them in a way that keeps the trust level. So it's not about just abolishing any obstacle to the free research. It's about keeping the trust that created the data, so that future generations will also entrust our tax collectors and even the hospitals with their data. So I'm very optimistic that this will be possible, and that these data can help us find answers to some of the great social challenges of our time. Not only in medicine, but also in all other fields of science, environment, health, welfare, climate, materials, molecules, and so on. And before I finish, I would like to express how happy I am to say that this area enjoys strong political support across governments in the Nordic region. All Nordic countries support and push for collaboration of research infrastructure. In October last year, Nordforsk appointed a high-level group that gives strategic advice on infrastructure cooperation, and you will hear from that later in the conference. The Nordic Council of Ministers also strongly supports the development of e-science and e-infrastructures. We have, for example, funded the e-science globalization initiative, a large Nordic research and educational initiative to promote Nordic collaboration on e-science. Further activities to mention are the Noria-Nets on registries, an expert network appointed by Nordforsk, which has become a trademark of the Nordforsk model of working, the Noria-Nets. This group will very soon propose actions that will strengthen Nordic cooperation on registry-based research and increase the use of health and social registries in Nordic countries. This initiative, again, is a part of the Nordic Council of Ministers program Sustainable Welfare, Sustainable Nordic Welfare, which is a program that aims to find new and innovative welfare solutions in our region. This program also includes another important initiative, a Nordic Clinical Research Network, Nordic Clinical Alliance, that aims to increase the number of clinical trials in the Nordic countries. We have in many ways fallen behind, and we shouldn't, because we have the context that really would provide the best context for clinical trials. When we pool our interests together, we become bigger and more attractive in the field of clinical trials, which I think we have a huge common interest in doing so. As a closing remark, I would like to stress that collaboration between scientists and researchers is not a new thing, of course. It happens all the time. It has happened for generations. It happens every day. It happens because our societies are interlinked. Universities are interlinked. Research labs and individuals are closely linked. And it happens because we all know and trust each other and collaborate and share resources. What we try to do on a Nordic level is to facilitate this, enhance it, push it, to put in place the right conditions to create a Nordic scene, so to speak, for research and innovation. Making use of the context that is already there, the common context that makes it so much easier to cooperate in our region than with anyone else. I sincerely trust that your work here in Stockholm will benefit the development of this common context, this common scene for research and innovation, and in these 2 days, specifically on the question of infrastructures. Thank you very much, and I wish you the very best for the conference.
Well, thank you, Dagfinn. It was a very good and interesting start to this conference. This is, of course, not the first time that we discuss research infrastructure on the Nordic level. Already in 2008, the Swedish Research Council, together with the Nordic Council of Ministers and Nordforsk, arranged a conference about research infrastructure. And it was stated at that conference that everyone is talking about research infrastructure. And of course, that was right in 2008, but it's even more right today. Everyone really is talking about research infrastructure. And the reason for that, of course, has to do with the advancement of research as such. Research is becoming more and more, and has so for a long time, before 2008 and after 2008, become increasingly more dependent on also the infrastructure for research. Infrastructure from many different aspects. Of course, the big infrastructures like, as was mentioned, ESS, MAX4, CERN and others are what most people think of when they talk about research infrastructure. But research infrastructure is, of course, much more than only that kind of the very large, heavy infrastructure. Research is, as we already heard, of course also to do with registers, with e-science, and more and more research in all areas is becoming dependent of a functioning infrastructure for research. I would also say that the advancement of research in the meaning of that also research importance for the development of society in general, the big challenges, the grand challenges that research is facing, is also enhancing the need for a working, functioning infrastructure for research. Given this background, of course, it is important and natural for the Swedish presidency, for the Nordic Council of Ministers, to choose research infrastructure as the theme for this big conference. If it's easy to state the importance and underline the importance of research infrastructure, I think that it's also important that we realize that there are problems with research infrastructure. There are, of course, financial problems, especially at the time where most of European countries are going through recessions and have problems, not least with their research financing. The Nordic countries being, generally speaking, an exception to that. That might be seen as that we have a special responsibility also from the Nordic countries to take our part in realizing the research infrastructures that are necessary for research also on the European level and of course also on the global level. But there are problems with the financing. There are of course also problems of setting the priorities. Even in the Nordic countries, which are doing relatively well financially, also when it comes to the financing of research, it's not, of course, possible to finance everything that is needed. So setting the priorities is one of the really big challenges when we talk about especially the more expensive parts of research infrastructure. As I said, the Nordic countries being to a large extent the exception from the general European picture, When I talk to my colleagues all around Europe, almost everyone looks with some envy on me and saying, "Oh, you're coming from Sweden. Oh, it's amazing how you keep up the financing and increase the financing of research." I suppose that my colleagues from the other Nordic countries are also meeting that kind of envy. We are a bit of an exception from the general picture. In Sweden, the latest two research and innovation bills that was presented to the Swedish Riksdag, the Swedish Parliament, has meant that we increase the research funding, the government's research funding in real terms with some 35% over an 8-year period, in a situation where most of European countries are meeting cuts in their research budgets. That gives us possibilities, and it gives us also a responsibility for handling such an increase, such a situation in a positive way, not only for Sweden, but also for the more general European scene when it comes to research. As I said, research infrastructure is not only the big investments like Max4 or ESS or CERN or in physics and hard science. It's also research infrastructure in almost all areas, or at least in many areas. E-science, I would like to underline that, is extremely important. As we heard, the Nordic countries has a common possibility based on our tradition of registries going back for a very long period of time. This is extremely interesting, and extremely possibilities lies in this for research in the Nordic countries, but of course also in a wider, once again, European context. This is extremely important. That was one of the themes in our research bills, and I would like to underline this also as very important in the Nordic context. But of course, the really big investments are more in the heavy science, in physics and corresponding areas. Let me point to 3 areas where we are from the Swedish government investing heavily. I will not start with ESS and Max4, that has already been mentioned. I will come back to them. But let me point to SciLife Lab. SciLife Lab has the intention, we are investing in building up one of the absolutely strongest research infrastructures when it comes to technology for molecular bioscience, with the intention of competing with the very best, being a Swedish broad institute, or at least very close to that level of research. Our ambition is for SciLife Lab to have a yearly budget that will be around 1 billion Swedish kronor per year, which is 110 million euros or something like that. That is a major undertaking. It is not possible, even though that we increase our research budget with this 35%, for the government to be the sole investor, to take the full responsibility. It is important to combine the efforts, not only from government, but also from the universities themselves, of course, but also from the private side, from foundations like the Wallenberg Foundation and others. It is through this combination that it is possible to realize infrastructure investments on that scale. ESS and Max4 are, of course, a major undertaking. If you look at ESS, that is at the moment the largest European research investment in infrastructure. We're not quite there yet, but we have good hopes of being able to start building ESS in the second half of 2014. The total investment will be around 1.9 billion euros. And Sweden, together with a number, some 15 European countries, has to take the responsibility for that investment. It's not only a European undertaking, it certainly also is a Nordic undertaking. Sweden and Denmark and Norway form the main investors. Together, the Nordic countries will invest some 50% of this 1.9 billion euros. That is a major Nordic undertaking. We have not left out the possibility also for Finland and other Nordic countries to participate in this. We're not quite there yet, but we will continue that efforts of forming this as a really joint Nordic undertaking. This is ESS will be a flagship when it comes to research infrastructure. It will be the world's most powerful neutron source. Europe is a major research area when it comes to neutron research. Europe has been leading neutron research for a long period. We will not be able to keep that leadership unless we have available in Europe also the most powerful neutron source. We will have that with ESS. MAX IV is not a European undertaking. It is at the moment primarily a Swedish undertaking. But we see that MAX IV, that is complementing ESS in many respects, extremely important for example, material science and a long area of research, a longer line of research areas, that will certainly be open also for participation for researchers from other Nordic countries, also European countries, but primarily also Nordic countries. There is a tradition from the previous Max Lab sources of working together between Nordic countries and Baltic countries, and we certainly would like to see that continue also when it comes to MAX IV. MAX IV will be the world's leading synchrotron radiation source. And the combination of ESS and MAX IV being situated close together outside Lund will make the south of Sweden together with Denmark and Norway and the north of Germany the most powerful area in the world for research in many important research areas. Like molecular science, like many other areas of research. And this is extremely important, not only for Sweden, Denmark, Norway. It is important from a Nordic perspective. It will certainly place Nordic research very much at the forefront in many important research areas. But it is important to state that research infrastructure is not only important for research itself. As I said, research is becoming more and more important also for being able to meet the grand challenges that society faces. If we will be able to solve issues when it comes to the challenges when it comes to the environment, for example, or health issues for an aging population, or many other areas that will be important in the future. It is important to have availability also of research infrastructure on the highest possible level. The meeting of grand challenges is a theme not only in the Nordic countries when it comes to research. It is, of course, as you all know, also on the European scene. It's one of the 3 pillars of Horizon 2020. And if the Nordic countries should be able to continue to play an important role also in the coming research and innovation program of the European Union. Once again, the research infrastructure is, of course, extremely important. Nordic cooperation is important in itself. It has a value in itself. But Nordic cooperation is even more important, I would say, to provide added value. The Nordic countries are successful when it comes to research. We are in the forefront in research. We are in the forefront of how much of GDP that we spend on research. Many other countries are looking with some envy on us today. But for us to be able to keep that kind of a status, to be ahead, it is extremely important that we work together. That the Nordic cooperation can provide the added value. And to us, research infrastructure is probably the most obvious example that each and every one of the Nordic countries are not in itself big enough or successful enough or have the financing enough to do everything on our own. Something will be done on the European level. As I said, the ESS is a very good example. But in order for Nordic countries to play an important role on the European scene when it comes to infrastructure, we must also work closely together on the Nordic scene. ESS will be built in Sweden and Denmark. It would have been impossible for us to come up with this project on our own. Sweden couldn't do it. Denmark, I'm sure, couldn't do it without the Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian cooperation. This infrastructure, the world's most powerful neutron source, would probably not have been built at all. And certainly, if it had been built in Europe, it would have been in one of the large countries in Europe, where traditionally almost all research infrastructure has been placed. So the cooperation between the Nordic countries also provides the possibility for having research infrastructure on the European and global level housed within the Nordic countries. I think that is also extremely important. I look forward to the result of the discussions at this conference. I hope that we will be able to take it one step further than what came out of the 2008 conference, where it was stated that everyone is talking about the research infrastructure. This time it's not enough only to be talking. It's the time to provide also the answers and the solutions for how will we not only talk but realize research infrastructure. Thank you.
Det är bra. Är den på nu? I tried, yes. Dear participants, old friends, a lot of them in this audience from
from recent times and from old times and from the previous Swedish Chairmanship's conference. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. And I will try to talk about how to translate this talk that we have talked about into action, and step by step trying to accomplish the ambitions in a real way and do it with sustainability. This is at the core of Nordforsk's ambition, and I think that I would like to connect to the previous speakers by saying a few words about the added value of Nordic cooperation in this field. Of course, we shouldn't cooperate on the Nordic level if we can do it better in our individual countries or by cooperating with somebody outside the Nordics. But most of the time, there is this win-win situation when we cooperate Nordic. And why is that? And especially in research infrastructure. I think the first reason is that research infrastructure is really expensive. So we need to be there to facilitate the cooperation for that very reason. Also, as has been mentioned already here several times, in order to accomplish really good science, high quality, excellent science, we need excellent research infrastructure. This is true if we address basic science problems, but this is maybe especially true when we address these grand challenges of our time with the help of knowledge. I think we live in an era where knowledge is our new kind of defense weapon, in a sense. And so we should use the opportunity to actually produce this knowledge on the Nordic level. Also, because we have a few other advantages, one of them being that we have good education in this field, already to start with, but also that the Nordic Centers of Excellence, for example, have inbuilt in their concept also contributions to education in upcoming fields with new knowledge. I think that is extremely important because as was mentioned already in the beginning, this is about cooperation between people, and we need people who know how to use the infrastructure in order to accomplish all this. Also, I learned from Lars Börjesson, who is going to talk after me, who is also the chair of this this high-level group that was mentioned before, that research infrastructure is like sugar. It also attracts users of many different kinds. So it actually attracts innovation. And I think that's an additional importance when we talk about added value of actually investing in research infrastructure. So this is why we do it. So what are we doing now concretely in order to take these steps? At Nordforsk, first of all, we try to increase the use across borders, to try to help infrastructure users in one country to be able to use infrastructure in another. It sounds simple and self-evident, but okay. It sounds self-evident and easy, but there has to be some incentives for doing that. It's not happening by itself. So to increase the use across borders of infrastructure is really important. Second, I think it's also very much needed to establish new infrastructures. We heard a lot about the ESS and Max 4 and so on. But I think that Dagfinn Høybråten is right when he says that it's a golden opportunity also for register research. Now we have e-science, and we have also technical possibilities to preserve data. And this coordination of registered data is something that needs, we need to work with it. But we are actually, in the Nordic countries, we have historical data that go far back. And I think it's something that we couldn't find anyplace else in the world. So it's just the beginning of something, I think, that we see now. And we have worked quite a lot with register research in these NORIANET registers, trying to address some of the challenges that has to be overcome. They might be legal or ethical or technical or of some other organizational maybe. And I think that is a doable way forward. So I looked very much at this register thing. What we do now is that we have also started and will also increase pilots in this field. I just want to mention what has maybe mentioned here before, the BBMRI Nordic, which is addressing now the colon cancer pilot to see where you come with genetic data in this kind of big disease. But we also have cooperation on clinical trials on the Nordic level, and we will continue with this way of building databases at the same time as we address important problems in society to see what the costs are, what the obstacles are, and what the advantages are. I think that we can address problems that much better, like youth unemployment. What do we know really? If we look at the Nordic level as one level, it will be much more knowledge about the real background factors. How do we do it? I think that you have already seen, maybe outside here, that we have this report called Enhancing Nordic Research Infrastructure Collaboration. We prepare this kind of things before we start working with, for example, infrastructure. This is, and I know that in the audience here are some people who have worked very heavily with this report. Thank you, somewhere. It's a comparison of the different Nordic countries' roadmap for infrastructure, which is something, it's a basis for taking the next step. The interesting thing is what happened when this was presented to the board of Nordforsk more than a year ago. Then one of the board members said, this is really good, we need this, but where is the next step? Where is the Nordic level? Can we do, if we do something together, it might be simpler. It might not be so many duplications. It might be possible to strengthen with what is already strong, but also build areas where we see that we lack knowledge in all the Nordic countries, for example. And this was actually the birth of the high-level group, because then the board decided that we would need a group of specialists in different fields, from humanities to physics, from different countries, Nordic countries, but also from outside the Nordics, to really address the priorities, because, as I said, it's expensive. So we need to also think about how to move forward to make the most of the existing Nordic money. So I think that is the next step to be taken, to start thinking Nordic rather than country by country by country, to think about everything we do in research infrastructure as something Nordic. Somebody asked me before I came here, what do we want to accomplish? What is the ambition of this big gathering? And I think I would like to contribute by giving my answer to that question. I think we should strive for nothing less than a joint research infrastructure policy in the Nordic countries. I think that we struggle in many of the Nordic countries with national research infrastructure policies. And I think this is the time to move that up, like the ENRIN group was moved up in a sense, because we have started, we have the basis now. And I think actually when listening to Peter here, that it's something that policymakers at different levels, research community, facilitators and funders all want. I think we can do this together. So this is my message to the conference. We should strive for nothing less than a Nordic infrastructure research policy. Thank you.
Okay. It's a pleasure to come here to talk at this conference, and I had the pleasure really to be quite a lot involved in the last conference about research, Nordic research infrastructure 5 years ago. I also had the pleasure then to conclude that conference. So what I will do today is actually to start up with looking backwards to learn a little bit on what we can do forward and in the future. So this will be more or less a resume of what we did in 2008 first. And the title here to start with is almost the same as the one of the conference 5 years ago. But how has research infrastructure and e-science supported Nordic competitiveness? And that one can ask, of course. It's not easy to measure. So this was the conference 5 years ago, and I will say a few words about the conclusions of that one. There will be conclusions also prepared for this conference. But first, we have this question: how has the research infrastructure contributed? We can see that the competitiveness index is very high for the Nordic countries in the world. So somehow there is some positive sign of this, but whether the research infrastructure has contributed or not, we really don't know. But I will look into some things which has happened since 2008 anyway. So at the last conference, there were 4 themes. There were infrastructure and e-science in energy, climate, and environment. There was infrastructure and e-science in welfare and health. And they address really some of the global challenges or grand challenges. And then advancing technologies in e-science, which was supposed to be very important for this. And then it was also one part which is more policy related, which is national strategies and solutions related to research infrastructure. So the conference statements last time was really what several of the previous speakers have talked about, that there is a huge potential for enhancing science and competitiveness through increased Nordic cooperation on research infrastructure. So everyone testifies to this, and also that it should be done in areas of particular strength, like energy, climate, health, welfare, and e-science. And all conference participants, at least those who their voices were heard, expressed strong support for increased cooperation in one way or the other. And also it was recognized that at that time, in 2008, several of the research councils had already started to form roadmaps about research infrastructure. And there was also the European one, the ESFRI, which were about to update to its second roadmap. And it was timely for the Nordic countries to do something now, not only to talk at that time, and perhaps we have, as Peter said, we should also do something else than talk at this conference. But I will show that many things has actually happened. So it was also recognized a number of opportunities here, what one should actually do. And there are four different ones. One should use better use and easier access to existing small, medium-sized Nordic infrastructures. And here there was a call by Nordforsk just a year after this conference, which addressed this. There should be a new joint Nordic infrastructures that underpin the excellent research and related to the Nordic top-level initiatives which were about at that time, about databases and registries, which we have heard about today as well, research facilities like ESS and so on, and about e-infrastructure. And some things has happened there. Establish international facilities in the Nordic countries. It's important to, as Gunnel said, that researchers are attracted to research infrastructure as to flies to sugar, actually. One would really like to use the best research facilities which is around. And of course one will come here. So one would like to establish international facilities in the Nordic countries, and also when this is not possible and when we have research at other places which we are very interested in using, we should join forces to set the priorities and also to discuss the strategies of those. There was also one part which is about the organization. How do we organize on the Nordic level? This is really relatively loosely organized, but there is still Nordic cooperation, and we have heard today that we have some common interest in various things. We have an ease to work together and so on. But there were some things which were identified, which is particularly important for the cooperation, that we should have bottom-up processes to ensure scientific interest. That is fundamental, and that is something which we have always done in the Nordic countries. I think one should underline that. There should be better coordination on the policy level, and I think there have been quite a lot of increased coordination on the policy level among the Nordic countries. There is a better understanding of differences in national priorities, and we had here the NORIANET, which has addressed this, which Gunnel talked about in a very good way. There should be acceptance in asymmetry in involvement. All countries may not be interested in all facilities. There should not be one common Nordic thing, but if there are common interests, one should try to coordinate. And it was also said that there should be an enhanced facilitator role for Nordforsk at this conference. So this was pretty much the conclusion from the last conference. So what has happened since then? I've indicated a few things. Of course, there are changes on various levels. This has already been touched upon. Globally, addressing these global challenges, they were really put up at the Lund Declaration in 2009. But addressing the global challenges has become more and more important for research policy around the world. Economic crisis, of course, is something which has happened, which is global, but it's particularly in Europe. We have heard about that. And the Nordic countries' economy is shown to be more sustainable than others, more or less. There are also global projects, like the Square Kilometre Array for astronomy. There is the Research Data Alliance. One realizes that one has to share data over disciplines and all over the world, and therefore this Research Data Alliance was inaugurated this year in Gothenburg, actually. Which is very important for cooperation. On the European level, ESFRI has made an update of the roadmap in 2010. ESFRI also has got 2 enhanced mandates since 2008, which is important to remember. And one is that one should implement 60% of the research infrastructures on the roadmap. And so that was a few years ago, and earlier this year, ESFRI also got the mandate to prioritize the infrastructures on the roadmap, which is a difficult task on the European level, of course. There's so many invested interests of various kinds, economical, political, scientific, and so on. But this is the mandate. Also, since last conference in 2008, the ERIC, the European Research Infrastructure Consortium, has been established as a legal entity for research infrastructure in Europe. So this is also new since then. Recently ESFRI and European Commission has launched an assessment of all the research infrastructures on the roadmap, which is looked upon with high interest of all ministries and research councils around Europe. And here is also what is around at the moment, that there is a one-time European Commission support announced for implementation of high-priority ESFRI projects. And this is something which I will return to a little bit later. So these are some things on the European level. On the Nordic, there has been this call on joint Nordic use of research infrastructure from Nordforsk. National roadmaps and organization has evolved during this time. There has been more funding allocated to research infrastructure in the Nordic countries generally. And this was this Norea-Net on research infrastructure. Then when it comes to the more of the things, for the e-infrastructure, there has been a lot of activity since 2008. And I think this is, one should underline this. There has been the Nordic e-science action plan, the Nordic e-infrastructure collaboration, the Nordic e-science globalization initiatives. And I think these are very important for the future for the Nordic research. And we are pretty much ahead of most of the other countries in this area. Nordic coordination related to some of the ESFRI projects. There has been discussions when we find it's being of interest, for example, for the biobanks to cooperate between the Nordic countries, for the ESS and ICOS and ASCAT and so on. So this is quite important thing as well, to be able to coordinate the interests here between the ESFRI projects. And the Nordic EMBL nodes on molecular medicine was established. And there has also been an initiative for Nordic-Baltic cooperation on the MAX4 synchrotron, as we have heard also from Peter Honeth. On the project-wise, 2009, this was after the last conference. There was the decision on that Lund should be the site for the European Spallation Source among the ministries in Europe. So this has happened since last conference. 2010, there was the decision to build MAX4. So this also happened since last conference. There are 10 projects on the ESFRI roadmap, which is in the implementation phase now. None were at that time. And there is Nordic involvement in several of them. And there have been the first ERICs, legal entities, established for some of the projects, like Share, Clarin, and BBMRI. So this is quite a lot which has happened since 2008. So it's a little bit different landscape. And this is taken from the last ERIC committee in Brussels. What is the status of the different ESFRI projects? And we see those in green here, where you have the ERICs established, Share and Clarin, and you also have the BBMRI now. You have the blue ones, where you have an ERIC in preparation. So there are quite a lot of European Research Infrastructure Consortium in preparation around Europe. And you have also the red ones, are those in implementation, the 10 projects throughout Europe, which is in the implementation phase. So this gives a map of what's ongoing in Europe in general. So I will return here also to show some real pictures of real things. And this is the MAX4 site in Lund, outside Lund, in northeast of Lund. 1st of October, and what you see here is, of course, the big ring, the synchrotron ring. You have a LINAC, which is underground in this direction, This building is around 400 meters long, and you have another building in the middle there, which is for a smaller ring. But this is ongoing, and that was not even decided in 2008 that we should have this. And this is what it looks like right now. And this is a close-up of the ring. And this is also that to show that equipment is being installed in the linear accelerator. It has been installed during the last months. So it's there. And we had the French delegation with Christian Alba, who is in the audience here this Monday, to look at the installations. And as Peter Honeth said before, we are really encouraging Nordic and Baltic and international cooperation in various kinds, and this is being discussed. But this is a facility which really will be world leading. There was a recent Nature and Scientific American article about this which tells that the Americans are way behind. So they have canceled their upgrade of the big facility outside Chicago, the APS and Advanced Photon Source, and because they know about the technology which has been developed here. And therefore they said, well, you have to upgrade it using this technology. So they've canceled the old one. And this happens now in Japan. It happens in Europe as well, different places where one uses this technology. So actually here, Sweden and Nordic countries are well ahead of the world. And the MAX 4, this looks a little bit odd. Anyway, there will be an inauguration of MAX 4 in 2016, 21st of June, the brightest day of the year, and at noon. So, but this is perhaps the dark picture. Something has happened here. Another thing I will just touch upon, it has been mentioned several times, it's ESS. It will be situated here, and you have MAX 4 there. And there will probably, most likely, be a ground break during this summer. And so the two facilities will really complement each other. As Peter said, this will be the world-leading place for this kind of, where you use X-rays and neutrons to investigate matter, molecules, materials, and so on. So this will have for a very long time, have a very big influence on science in Europe and the Nordic countries. So just a short update of this. Site decision was in 2009. There has been a pre-construction phase until this year, where you have the technical design refined, you have the costing, legal agreement, and so on, and licensing going on. Now 2013 has been a very important year, where you have the technical design report is ready, you know what you are going to build. The costing has been established. The ERIC status has been submitted to the European Commission. And there has been the first annual review of the facility. It's like they do in America, very thorough evaluation, Lehman style of review. And some high-level conclusion is that ESS is now a real project from all points of view, well-shaped and well-organized. The management of the project is strong, well-determined, motivated, and success-oriented. ESS will start real construction work in June 2014, ground break. And there are now very good discussions and negotiations going on with the commitments from Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Switzerland, and France so far, and others are underway next month. I will just touch very briefly before I stop here about the high-level advisory group at Nordforsk on research infrastructure. The mandate of this one is to give strategic advice to Nordforsk on matters concerning research infrastructure cooperation in the Nordic countries. So it has had its first meeting in October this year, and one of the main aims for next year is to give advice to Nordforsk's new strategy plan. So this will be quite intense during the spring. Members of this are the ones in the bottom, Paula, Inge, Leif, and Vigdis, Juni, and Peter are from the Research Council in the different countries, in Nordic countries. And on top we have some more of the international experts. So there is a mix of experts and representatives on the research councils. And there is, of course, a mix of very different disciplines in this. So there are some first recommendations, and one is about the registries and the pilots, which Gunnar just mentioned. We have recognized in this group that there are unique opportunities for health and welfare research using these databases and registries. But there are also challenges associated, as we know. There are ethical, legal, and organizational and technical. But we very strongly support these initiatives of Nordic pilot projects to harmonize on joint Nordic data sets in order to test things for the future here, really. But it's also of utmost importance to secure the personal integrity. And here one should really work on the technical solutions on this to secure the integrity. But without facing the national boundaries. And this is a big challenge. So there are technical challenges in this, but there are also ethical and legal ones. But to go forward with pilots here is really important. So this is one of the first statements of the group. I think this will be discussed during this conference. The other one relates to the ESFRI projects, and that is, I mentioned that there is funding set aside by the Commission, and they have asked ESFRI to make prioritization. Also, the ministers have asked ESFRI to make prioritization and to prioritize among the best projects of the order of differ sometimes between 5 and 10 projects. But here there is one should explore this opportunity which is there on the Nordic level. Nordic cooperation for those projects which we are already cooperating on should really take the opportunity to do something here. Because what happens here is that in ESFRI one would like to seek support for the different projects, and if we have common interest, we have the opportunity to do that among the Nordic countries. And there are common interest among the Nordic countries for neutrons, for biobanks, for LifeArch, EATRIS, ESS Survey, ASCAT, and others. There are others as well. Shouldn't forget any one of them. But I think this is urgent. There will be a meeting in ESFRI in a few weeks, which will be important for this. So there is an urgency to try to cooperate, and this will probably also take a little bit longer time, but I think it's time really to do coordination here. So I will stop with this, and thanks for the attention, and I will look forward with excitement of the outcome of this conference, which I think will be very important for the future science and research in the Nordic countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as you can see from the program, we are allowed to have a short coffee break. We are a little bit late for this, so I would urge you to try to come back in 20 minutes instead of half an hour, which we were supposed to. And then we will start with the training and education for efficient cross-border